Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Collective Clicks podcast. This is your host, Brandon Bateman, and today I'm joined by Daniel McClam. He's the founder of InvestorBase. We talk all about Dispo in today's market, what has changed, what metrics should you be tracking, and how do you make your Dispo team a team that doesn't just take orders, but actually drives revenue for your wholesale business. I'll see you there. Daniel, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Good, brother. Long time no see.
Yeah, that's right. We were just hanging out at CG last week. Doing a little surfing together, or what's it called when you try to surf but you don't actually surf, more like survival swimming.
I was survival swimming. You're shredding, dude. I got it on video. Don't make me
That's
don't
right.
make me don't make me pull it up for everybody on this podcast.
Yes. Well, that's an exaggeration. So to not put your credibility into question, Daniel, I think we should probably move on and talk about some other stuff here.
Yeah, Brandon will sell
Um,
you short, but I have video evidence. But yeah, we can move on if you want.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, CG was awesome last week. Really cool to see what's going on. I'm excited for today just to talk about Dispo with you. We can go through a whole bunch of topics here, but I'm kind of curious before we get into all of that. What's your background? Like I know you've been running an investor base for a little bit here, but what did you do before that?
Yeah, for sure. Not your typical wholesale journey background. More. I majored in commercial real estate out of college, and then I went into commercial brokerage for like 3 years. Loved it. Did industrial sales and leasing. Did a lot of deals with the team of dudes that I was on. So we worked with a lot of investors in that space. But obviously, the underwriting is a little bit more advanced. We're doing multi-tenant buildings with different lease structures and blah 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 blah. So uh, had a lot of formal training and experience on that side of the playing field. 2021 started a brokerage. Never did any brokerage. We solely did investment wholesaling. We really only sold to hedge funds. Um, so we did that for about 2 3 years. Yeah, and ultimately, investor base was a problem that we had to solve in our own business.
Yeah, I can imagine. So that's and for anybody who's a little new to the industry, like I mean, you could selling to hedge funds was an awesome business model for I don't know how many years. Probably the 2 or 3 years that you did it, and
Yeah.
then not so awesome anymore. The moment that interest rates went up, I'm assuming is when it kind of collapsed.
Yeah. So like around October 2022, crap hit the fan for sure.
Cool. So for you, investor base, you built this for your own business first. Is that
Mhm.
what I'm understanding? You're just like my model is I sell to hedge funds. Now we got to figure out how to sell to someone who's not a hedge fund and got to find some way to do that.
Yeah. I mean, we got forced into it pretty quickly. We were selling to like 8 or 9 different hedge funds pretty consistently. And yeah, October 2022, I think it was within 30 or 60 days, man, really that fast that, rates went from, threes to fives and their cost of debt just went up. And all of a sudden, we were left holding the bag on a lot of deals. I think 8 of the hedge funds exited the markets that we were in within a 30 to 60 day period. And we had like 30 deals under contract at that point in time. So if anybody's listening to this, like, we weren't unique to the fact that we were selling to hedge funds. I think we were unique to the fact that we had never sold a deal to a local flipper landlord, like ever, because we built our wholesale business during the time of hedge funds. Like that was the only reason I got into this business. I was like, all right, I'm gonna go ride this wave. It's gonna be fun. These guys are paying 120% of ARV, and when they go away, I'm gonna hang up the cleats and go back to commercial brokerage, right? And so like that was the tentative plan. And as you know, when you start running a business, you start hiring people. It's like, okay, this is a little more intensive than what I was expecting. And people are building a career based on this business that I've built. I've got people to move here for this business, and so it was not that easy at that point. But there was a decision where I decided to scale the business. Um, it's just, man, we got rocked pretty hard, and so we were in so deep at that point. I mean, we had 30 deals under contract when those guys pulled out, so we had to figure out how to dispo those deals immediately, and it did take us a little bit to figure it out.
Yeah, of course. I'm curious. So obviously the hedge fund thing is something that changed quite a bit around that time. But if we're even looking like from around that time until now, your perception, because that whole time you've been pretty deep in dispo of properties. How would you describe like the state of dispositions right now in the market compared to how it's been for the past few years?
Yeah, I did a presentation on this on stage at a mastermind event, and I learned a lot from actually doing the presentation myself because I did a lot of research on it, and it did explain some things about where we're at today. Um, One, we're in a weird market, right? It's like no one can deny that, right? We're really not in a seller's market. We're not in a buyer's market yet. But what everybody is for damn sure of is it's not 2021, 2022 anymore. Um, and so the research I did, what I found and what we've learned from onboarding, 4,000 plus wholesale companies is, in 2020, 2021, 2022, it was a crazy seller's market. I mean, you could close your eyes, write an address on a piece of paper and get, 10 offers on your doorstep. Uh, and so the result of that is people had to work less hard in Dispo, right? You could send the mass blast email, you could send the mass blast text, and you could sit back and, these offers would come in. You wouldn't have to do a lot of, extracurricular work or run, say, an outbound campaign to generate a multiple offer scenario. And so when the market starts to shift like it has, some people still do the same strategy, and it just doesn't work anymore because buyers' engagement is so much lower. And that's probably one of the biggest changes in Dispo over the last 5 years. It's like, what do buyers engage with, you know? And to add on to that, man, just we ran a poll to about 100 flippers and landlords and said, hey, how many wholesale deals do you get per day? The answer on average was six per day, right? And some of these guys were getting 8, 10, 12, 16, whether it's email, call, text. And, let's just take six. You multiply that times 365. That's like 2,000 and something deals per year. But I think the important thing to note is like every time a wholesaler sends out their deal in 2026, you're competing with five other deals per day. So it's like, somebody can go pull some more data and right, they might find 10, they might find four, but on average, I mean, we collected that information from some pretty high level flippers, like the guys you want to be selling your deals to and landlords. But the thing is, it's like, how do we differentiate ourselves? How do we differentiate our deal? How do we communicate with these guys differently? What are we saying to them? How do we price the deal, which is a huge one? But how do we package the deal? How many photos do we have in it? Are we making the photos look good? Right? Like, what details are we putting in the deal? What's the text copy? Like, what's the CTA? It's like a lot of little things that go a really long way in 2026 when dispo is harder.
Yeah, one thing I saw recently that maybe supports what you're talking about. I don't know if you've seen it, Adam, like ATTOM data. They have a gross flipping
Hmm.
ROI metric. Sounds like you've seen it before. Yeah. So context for anybody that hasn't looked at this recently, like you can see it for forever. And it doesn't take into account like the amount of money it costs to do a flip, but it just looks at what price are people buying them at versus what price they're selling them at, and it shows it as a percentage. And it's basically it was insane in those years you're talking about, like 2021, 2022, like insanely high. And then it went down hard when the interest rates went up. And then it kind of rebounded like 2024 and was uh, was a little bit higher. I want to say 2023 was a little bit higher than 2024 was even higher, and in 2025 it went back down, kind of similar to where it was when interest rates went up, and I thought that was really interesting. And if you look at those lows, it's kind of the lowest it's been since the financial crisis. And in the financial crisis, it was significantly, it was even lower, but it was the whole 2012 until 2022 was really elevated for gross flipping ROI. So, anyways, kind of weird to describe a graph there, but it makes me wonder when I see something like that, like is that putting pressure on flippers? And because that's putting on pressure on flippers is that putting pressure on wholesalers to actually be able to dispo properties at the right price compared to what they were before. Because it sure seems like we're hearing more now about properties not actually closing, like contract fallout and thinner deal spreads than we've heard for a long time.
Yeah. Also, like overall investment transaction volume has been
Oh,
severely
absolutely.
down. And you get those reports from lenders, like some of the
Mhm.
national lenders that aggregate a lot of data, and they're looking at, hey, how many like loan applications are being opened for hard money loans. Um, I mean, I saw that it was down at least cut in half over the last 6 to 8 months. And then I spoke with another aggregator of data that said the actual investment transaction volume had been cut into third. It was 6 to 8 thousand transactions per month, I think, in 2025, and in I think April, I was told by this gentleman that it was at 2,300 um, this year. So I'm like, wow, that's a substantial amount. Um, and whether that number's higher or lower, if you just look at it as a constant, it's like, hey, these guys are tracking total investment transaction volume, right? It's the same variables, but instead of 6,000, it's 2,300 for April, May, um, which is interesting. Like, so what does that tell me on the dispo side, and with what you're telling me? Um, not only are flippers getting squeezed, but maybe they've been squeezed for too long, and they want better deals, or else they're just not gonna do one. Um, it's definitely interesting to consider, and some of that data is starting to reflect the fact that hey, dispo is harder, and so when these flippers get squeezed, you know, wholesalers get squeezed.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The one thing that I often have to remind myself, like when I don't know if you've ever just, they actually talked about this in CG. I can't remember who it was. I was talking about like skip level meetings in your company, just
Hmm.
going like layer deep and deeper within the organizational structure and just kind of like observing and seeing what's going on. Um, and I've done a little bit of that. One thing that I've seen in my company, I'm just assuming this is true across other companies. You can tell me if this is true for you too. But it always feels like, you have a meeting, let's just say there's four people there. Everybody kind of has their voice. One person's a little louder, pushes a little more. But the way I always imagine is there's like a fifth person there, and they're actually the loudest out of anybody. And that person's like the status quo of whatever we've done up to this point. It just feels like it's kind of like it doesn't even have to be said, but the status quo always pulls so much harder. And businesses seem to like incrementally change from the status quo to something different, like in a very, very small way, versus if you started in a completely different place, you would end up in a completely different place. But it's not like normal behavior to like, rethink things. And I can tell you we've seen that with a lot of our clients as Dispo has gotten significantly harder. You just have that status quo of like Dispo used to be easy. And I think it used to be more of like an administrative duty than almost anything else versus like a revenue generating department in the business, right? That's kind of how like I think the typical investor has thought of it is acquisitions and marketing generates revenue, and then Dispo just kind of facilitates that revenue actually being realized. And what you're talking about here is it's a little bit of a shift in mindset that like Dispo is just as much as acquisitions or just as much as marketing is actually it's a place that revenue is created.
Absolutely, I think it's the main place that revenue is created. Now, maybe I'm biased in that, but a lot of people look at it. To your point, that makes me think of an order taker, right? It's like an order taker versus a sales guy. Like, is your product so good and priced so competitively that you just take orders, or are you actually selling somebody into a higher package, or whatever the case may be, right? But yeah, I think you're kind of nailing it spot on. It's way more in depth, and it is a sales funnel. I mean, it's marketing. It's a sales funnel. Um, and the most common pitfalls we see on our end, it's like people take the first offer they get, right? Or they're not producing enough offers in order to generate a competitive scenario. And really, the only way that you know that you maximize the value of the deal is if you have multiple offers on the deal and you run, say, a highest and best campaign on it. where you allow people to resubmit their highest offer. Typically if you want to maximize deal value, I see you need probably 6 to 7 offers on that deal. Because some might be a soft offer, lower, right? Some might be verbal. Some people might not have walked it. But if you can get between 6 and 8, that's where hey, I'm not really leaving money on the table. And you're able to drive about 75% a resubmission rate on those guys. But you have to funnelize it, right? I mean, it's from everything from how you're marketing the deal, the outbound campaign that you're running, the inbound campaign that you're running. It is a funnel. People just don't look at it like that.
I'm really curious. So you mentioned just a few of the things that we could focus on to optimize before, and that was a giant list of things. So let's just say I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, well, what are the things that are going to actually move the needle in my dispo versus just things that are distraction? Like I could, tweak that a few different ways over and over again all day, and it's just not going to really move the needle. When you're seeing people actually unlocking significantly larger assignment fees than what they were doing and significantly smaller contract fallout than what they were doing before, what are those things that are actually making the impact?
Yeah, for sure. So step one in a dispo process is likely going to be, well, it can be one of two things. It can be either sourcing the buyers that you're going to market to, or it's pricing and packaging the deal. Like typically for us, like I'm gonna want to have my landing page, my pricing, my packaging, everything ready to go before I start my campaign, of course, right? You got to get the marketing ready. So when it comes to an actual tactical thing that you can do to drive more what I call like top of funnel engagement to your deal, which is the most important thing to start. We need as many people getting eyeballs on this thing and getting in the door, getting into the funnel as possible. Tactically, you want to price lower in 2026. So historically, it's not really a science to pricing a deal. It's like more of an art, and you're looking at each individual deal uniquely, right? It can't be a set formula or a set fee that you're adding to every single deal because it's going to be different based on, hey, how many other like kind as is, pending comps are there on the market? AKA like what other as is deals am I competing with that are listed on the market? It's like, what is my competition analysis before I price this deal out there at 100,000? I want to see, hey, are other like kind properties actually selling for 100,000 on the market, right? I'm also going to look at investor comps. Hey, what are investors paying for like kind deals, right? If they're all paying
Mhm.
70 and no one's paid above 70, I probably shouldn't go and ask 80 or 90, right? So I think pricing competitively based on other as is comparables is incredibly important. And what you'll find is typically the first question that a buyer asks when you speak to them is, what are you asking for it? What is the price? And if you tell them the price and they say, nah, man, I'm not interested. Think so. They hang up the phone, then you priced it wrong. And you can just go ahead and imagine that if you're talking to people on the phone and they're telling you that if they're seeing your email or they're seeing your text, they're 100% thinking that. And so when you price it too high, what happens is you disqualify a lot of buyers solely based off your asking price. It's probably the most important thing that will drive engagement. Now, a limiting belief of a lot of people is like, well, man, what if I start the price too low and then I only get one offer, right? Well, that one offer you got, you might not have even gotten it in the first place if you priced it too high. I can tell you that for starters. But two, it comes down to like the process that you're running, right? And so you need to have a little bit of confidence in the buyers that you're sourcing and the process that you're going to run thereafter to generate multiple offer scenario. Um, Ultimately, if that person offers at your asking price, or if you want to call it starting price, which is what we usually call it, um, you don't have to take it. Just put it back out there. Work harder. Source the right buyers and send it to the right people and run the right campaign. And if you don't get any offers, then it wasn't a deal to start with. But pricing super important. Um, Yeah, I mean, there's other tips and tricks in there, like a big one that's a needle mover that I see a lot of people do, but I see a ton of people don't do it, man, is like actually setting a walkthrough date and an offer's due date before you start marketing the deal, right? Now, sometimes this depends on occupancy, right? Sometimes you're gonna have to coordinate with, you know, the seller and figure out a day that's gonna work. And that day might not work or they might not know, right? And that's okay. You can set out a tentative walkthrough date or coordinate that a little bit later. But if you have the opportunity to set a walkthrough date, probably 7 days out from after you get pictures, and then an offer's due date within 24 to 48 hours after the walkthrough date, what this does is this provides a lot of structure to your actual dispo process, but it's a forcing function for you to go out and generate as much interest on that deal as possible to get as many people into the funnel and into that walkthrough as you possibly can. This also gives you structure when it comes to reminding people on the same day of the walkthrough. There's slippage there all the time. Okay. So that's going to increase your walkthrough scheduled to your walkthrough completed rate, your show rate. Then you know that offer is going to be due in 24 to 48 hours. You've already set the expectations with those buyers that, hey, your offer is going to be due within 24 to 48 hours after the walkthrough day. So they're already prepared to have all their numbers ready, everything ready. That's going to increase the number of offers that you actually get. But most importantly, what this structure does is this allows you essentially either right at or right before offers due is to run a bottoms up approach and run a highest and best campaign, which that is where you maximize the client fees. Hands down, 100% of the time is when you run a highest and best approach and the bottoms up approach, that is where you're going to maximize assignment fees 10 times out of 10.
I'm familiar with highest and best approach. I don't know what bottoms up approach is. Could you explain that?
Yeah, so I actually learned this from some CG users, and then I have some other users in InvestorBase that actually run a similar process. And what I kind of like extracted and boiled it down to is, let's say you have an offers due date on like this Friday at 5 o'clock, right? That's when offers are due. Let's say we have 8 offers currently. The deadline's coming up. It's 2 hours before the deadline. It's like 3 o'clock, right? So 2 hours before the 5 o'clock deadline. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reach out to the bottom 50% of offers. And I'm going to say, hey, Brandon, how you doing? This is Daniel McClam. How you doing today? Doing great. Hey, man, look, I am just reaching out. I really appreciate you walking the property, make an offer. I just wanted to give you a courtesy call to let you know that as it sits right now, you're not in the running to be the highest offer for this deal, but you still have 2 hours if you want to resubmit at a higher offer. You're like, ah, damn. Okay. Well, let me see what I can do. Click on to the next one. Same call for the bottom 4, right? It's a courtesy call. Now, I'm a licensed broker. I don't give them, some people say, well, where do I need to be, right? What do I need to do to get it done, right? Tell me the exact number where everybody else is at, okay? So just some ethical standards for this practice is like, never share exactly where another person is. Don't really sell yourself short and give them an exact number that they need to be at because we haven't fielded everything else from everybody else, right? The one piece of guidance that, we used to give people in brokerage and that I would give somebody is simply, hey man, you might have to have a 9 in front of it, right? Like say the offers are going to need to land in like the 90,000 range or something like that. Hey man, look, you're probably going to have a 9 in front of it. It's going to be in the 90s or hundreds or wherever you think you need to say that. And then the highest and best approach is with the top 50%. So at 5 o'clock, I'm going to call the other 50%. I'm going to say, hey, it's a highly competitive situation, Brandon. Look, I really appreciate your offer. They're all really, really close, but we're going to have to do a highest and best on this one. And so we're accepting highest and best finals offers until 6 or 7 o'clock. Right? They say, ah, damn, okay. Just look, where do I need to be? Look, Brandon, I really just put your best foot forward, man. Just throw me what you got. And look, if we don't get this one for whatever reason, I'll be sure to send you the next one, and we'll try and do you solid on that one. And what you're targeting there is a 75% resubmission rate. So if I have 8 offers, I want 6 people to resubmit. And I mean, that's
That's
where
a
like you'll see people increase their offer by 5, 10, 15, 20, depending on what markets you're in. Like a higher price point deal, I mean, these guys are getting after it. But if you'd never run that process, you would have taken the first offer you get. You don't get that opportunity. No one's going to make you an offer at their absolute highest price off the bat. Like they're all trying to get a good deal. That's like you saying that you give the seller your best offer every single time.
yeah.
You know? So how do we extract their best offer? We have to leverage competition. Like when as a wholesaler do you give a seller their best offer, your highest and best offer? It's when they have more than one wholesaler or if they have more than one competitive offer on a deal. It's like, all right, I got to get aggressive with this one.
What I love about what you're saying, Daniel, is number one, you brought the tactic. Like, this is what we do to get the most value for it. Number two, the tactic comes with a metric. And the really cool thing about a metric is because here's the thing with Dispo, there's not a metric in the business that says, could you imagine if it showed up as an expense item on every investor's P&L? Like the gap between what you could have gotten for the deal if you ran your dispo process right and what you actually got for the deal. People would look at that and think it's one of the biggest expenses in their business, but it's not a number that you have, right? And in absence of having that number, which we could never truly have, we have to have other metrics that tell us, are we order taking in dispo or are we actually doing a really good job to get this deal sold for the highest dollar amount possible. What's cool about what you just presented is that's a fantastic metric, the offer resubmission rate. If you just measure that in dispo, it's one thing that gives you an indication. Like if that number's above 75%, it can't really be true that we're not doing at least some level of this process to maximize the offers that we're getting. Versus, I would assume that a lot of the investors that are getting, smaller deal spreads, you find that that number is going to be a little bit smaller, and it's evidence that there's still some money on the table for dispo. So that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, for sure. And like a constant variable, because some people might listen to this and then they're like, man, well, I only do one deal a month, or hey, man, I do like 30 deals a month, right? And so, like a true measure of how good is your dispo department is going to be the offers you're receiving per month on average, right? And like that kind of scales as you scale a little bit and as you grow your buyer relationships and as you grow in business. Like I wouldn't expect somebody who's been in the business for 15 years and has, 3 disposition managers and doing 30 deals a month. Like I would probably expect them to be getting at least 8 deals per deal or 8 offers per deal, right? Now, if you're on the lower end, yeah, you might be getting 3, 4, 5. Like the minimum number you need to run that highest and best campaign is really 3. Um, but I think everyone should be targeting 6 to 8 offers per deal to know that you're not leaving money on the table. Like that for me, regardless of the size of your business, is like that's the metric where I'm like, okay, if you're getting 6 to 8 offers per deal, then you are doing some good things in your dispo process, right? Like agnostic, if you're tracking every KPI and all that stuff, like the way we do, like you're doing something right. You have a big enough buyers list, your comms are good enough, you're pricing the deal good enough, you're packaging the deal right, um, and you're working people through the funnel the right way. So that's one in particular that like I look at from a stagnant number, not like a percentage of like, hey, how could you be doing more, right?
Yeah, that's also an incredible metric to keep your eye on. So that's awesome, Daniel. I appreciate you sharing that.
Hmm.
Anything else if you're picturing? So let's just say somebody prices the deal right. They're getting 6 to 8 offers. They're getting a 75% offer resubmission rate. They're doing the bottoms up, highest and best campaigns. All these different things that we've talked about so far. Uh, do you see people that are doing all those things and yet they're still leaving a lot of money on the table in Dispo?
Uh, no, not usually. I mean,
So we're talking about a small number of things that move the needle. That's it.
yeah. I mean, look, it's like when you drive competition, that's where the leverage is in your seat. It's like that is just what the market telling you what the deal is worth, right? And that's ultimately what we need is, we're doing all this work on the acquisitions front. We're spending, months, years following up with these leads to like get these deals under contract. And, some people just take orders or they send it out or they take the first offer they get. It's like, man, that's like us going out and just building an investor base and not caring what we sell it for. Like we could sell a lot of free subscriptions, like we need to get what the deal is worth. That was probably a pretty bad example there. Software that doesn't correlate at all to this one, but
I mean, it's true for any product. Like what you sell it at's going to make a massive, massive difference. And if you haven't, like, if you're listening to this and you haven't actually modeled out what that's worth to your business, I encourage you. What's wild about business is how much money is made like on the very margin. Because if you get that extra little bit per deal, I mean, you take a wholesale operation that's making, 20% profit margins. If they can just sell every deal for 10% more, they probably end up with close to 30% profit margins, right? And it's hard because you think, oh, that's just 10% more. How much difference is that? What if I have to work super hard to get that 10%? Well, let's just say you have to spend another 5% to get that 10%, and that you increase your profit margin by 5%, like as a nominal number, which in this circumstance is a 25% increase in your profit margin, which is insane how much it can actually affect your business profitability. One thing that I was just thinking about, so the example I gave you is, let's just say we're already getting 6 to 8 offers on each deal and all that stuff. What about if someone's pricing it right and they're trying to do the highest and best and the bottoms up approach and all that kind of stuff? They're just not getting enough offers per deal. I imagine the problem often comes down to just getting enough eyeballs on those deals.
Mhm.
And I imagine that's especially true. That's less common with the guy you're talking about who's doing 30 deals a month and has 3 dispo managers and has been doing this for 20 years. That's going to be probably a different scenario where they have a real asset built up to help sell deals. They have a reputation, they've got the list, all that kind of stuff. So let's just say I'm an investor where, I just can't generate that level of interest in my deals. How do you have the clients that you work with that are still getting the 8 offers on each deal despite being a little newer to the business? How are they doing it?
Yeah, that would be directly, like that issue at hand would be directly correlated to the buyers that you're sourcing, right? You're either not sourcing enough or you're not sourcing the right buyers. And so when it comes to that, I mean, that's where InvestorBase helps people a ton, right? We help the person who's doing 1 deal a month. We help the people who's doing 30 deals a month. Like we have ran so many deals through InvestorBase at this point. It's ridiculous. And what I can tell you for certain is like, you don't need thousands of buyers to market your deal to. If you have 100 unique buyers in InvestorBase and you run the campaign the right way, you will, and it's priced right, and it's packaged right, like you just said, you will produce 6 to 8 offers on that deal. 9 times out of 10, right? It's about sourcing the right buyers. So if you're pricing it right, you're packaging right, but you're still not getting the results of the offers number, then the number one issue it could be is you're not sourcing the right buyers. The second issue is you're not communicating with them the right way, right? So, I mean, we're limited to like 3 channels on the dispo front: email, text, and cold call. You don't really see people sending out a direct mail campaign or running PPC on a deal they're trying to sell, because we have this time window where we got to move this thing off the plate due to our inspection period. So my recommendation, obviously, run all 3 channels. Email is going to be your lowest response rate. Text is going to have a high response rate. Cold call is going to be naturally your highest response rate, or call to contact rate, or highest response rate, and your most effective form of communication, like by far. So we preach double call, voicemail, text on a 2-day campaign. And if you're doing that, you're making 150 touch points on the deal, and you're still not getting results, then it's probably something you're saying, right? And I've heard some pretty bad calls in the past from doing call reviews for people, and you name it. This is a sales call. These buyers are busy. We need to make sure that we are getting direct to the point. We have a lot of tips and tricks on actually making the call the correct way. But the only way to really find out, hey, do I have a bottleneck in my dispo department, is to actually run a dispo health scorecard type deal and look at the funnel, top to bottom, right? And so we have a scorecard I can share back with you, Brandon, if you want to attach it to this thing, that I'm happy to just give away for free. And it's for instance, the Offer resubmission rate, 75%. Like that's the last KPI in the funnel. Um, the top one is what's your call to contact rate, or what's your response rate based on the gross number of people that you sent the deal out to. And so on a call campaign, you should be getting about 35% call to contact rate with investor base buyers.
Noted. All right. Well, that's awesome. I think that's a fantastic resource, Daniel. I'd love to throw that one in the show notes.
Yep.
So thank you for taking the time to break out the dispo process for us today. If anybody's listening to this and they want to look into investor base, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you or someone on your team?
Yeah, 100%. I would recommend just booking a call with our team. Um, and Brandon will put a link into the show notes that will have a unique link that will also get you a discount on investor base. So make sure to use that. And what we do on the call is we break down what your dispo process looks like today, and essentially where investor base as a software can be baked into your existing process without you having to change too much. So what we do best is we identify the most likely buyers for your deal based on their transaction history. We give you their phone numbers for free. Um, and that's where it comes into sourcing buyers for you. We got a lot of other bells and whistles in there that have taken it from just a search page back in 2024 to what is now essentially an A to Z dispo solution for your business. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's incredible. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today, Daniel. I encourage anyone listening, go check out that link, go look into Investor Base. We've heard amazing things from many of our clients. And for everybody else listening, I'll see you next week.